Under a blood-red Montana sunrise in 1876, a Lakota warrior stands defiant, facing a valley alive with 1,200 teepees and 20,000 horses. Custer, with just 260 men, charges into a storm of 2,500 warriors. Dust explodes, hooves thunder, and lives hang in the balance. Why did he risk it all? What secrets fuel this clash of courage and tragedy? Uncover the truth of Little Bighorn, now. The Montana sky burned crimson, the sun a molten disk sinking behind jagged hills. On a windswept ridge, a Lakota warrior named Swift Hawk steadied his painted pony, his face streaked with ochre and black. His leather tunic clung to his sweat-soaked frame, and his staff, crowned with eagle feathers, danced in the restless breeze. Below, the Little Bighorn Valley pulsed with life, a sprawling village of 8,000 souls, as historian John Gray later chronicled. Smoke curled from 1,200 lodges, each a haven of laughter, stories, and dreams. Beyond, a herd of 20,000 horses grazed, their manes rippling like waves across the plains, so vast that U.S. Army scouts, squinting through dust on June 25, 1876, froze in disbelief. This was no mere encampment, it was a defiant nation of Lakota Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho, united to protect their way of life. In the village, Sitting Bull, the Hunkpapa Lakota leader, stood outside his teepee, his eyes tracing the horizon. At 45, his presence was a quiet storm, his voice low but resonant as he spoke to his council. "The Wasatch break their word," he said, his words sharp as flint. "The Black Hills, promised to us forever, now bleed with their greed." The 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie had sworn the hills sacred, but by 1874, gold fever had drawn 15,000 prospectors to Deadwood, their picks shattering the earth and the treaty alike. When Lakota leaders refused to sell in 1875, the U.S. unleashed its army to crush them. Across the valley, a tattered army scout named Tom Kern scribbled a note in the dust, 2,500 warriors, maybe more. His blue coat hung frayed, his hands trembling from exhaustion. He'd seen the village's scale, 3 miles of teepees, a living fortress guarded by the swollen Little Bighorn River to the east and cliffs plunging 100 feet to the west. Yet General George Armstrong Custer, 36, his golden curls glinting under a wide-brimmed hat, read the note and smirked. "We'll ride through them by sundown," he declared, his 260 men weary but loyal. Why did he ignore the warning? Ambition burned in him, a hunger for glory that blinded him to the odds. The village buzzed with defiance. Young warrior Red Cloud's daughter, barely 18, sharpened her knife, her eyes fierce. She'd fled the reservation's hunger and despair, joining Sitting Bull's coalition. "We fight for our children," she whispered to her brother, White Elk, as they prepared their ponies. The Army's General Alfred Terry, marching from forts 200 miles away, clung to a stale estimate of 800 warriors, blind to the 2,500 ready to fight. Why such a miscalculation? Arrogance and distance. The army couldn't grasp the unity forged by betrayal. As dusk fell, Swift Hawk spotted dust rising in the distance, soldiers. His heart pounded. Was this the moment their world would break? He galloped to warn Sitting Bull, his cry swallowed by the wind, "They come." The village stirred, warriors grabbing weapons, women shielding children. The stage was set, the air thick with fate. What drove the U.S. to shatter its promises so brazenly? Could honor have changed this path? June 25, 1876. Dawn cracked the sky, painting the plains in fiery gold. Lieutenant Charles Varnum, 27, slumped in his saddle, his body aching from a 60-mile ride. Leading 15 scouts, Crow trackers like Half-Yellow Face and Arikara couriers like Red Star, he was tasked with finding Sitting Bull's camp. The scouts, their eyes sharp as hawks, read the land like a sacred text. Varnum, a West Point man, was a stranger here, his vision blurred by dust and fatigue. At 4:30 a.m., they crested the Crow's Nest, a ridge 20 miles from the village. Half-Yellow Face froze, pointing to faint smoke curling against the horizon. Below, 20,000 horses blanketed the valley, a living sea signaling a massive camp. Varnum squinted, seeing nothing. "You're dreaming, no village, it's a nation," Boyer said, his voice grim. The camp sprawled 3 miles along the Little Bighorn, teepees nestled among cottonwoods, a fortress of 8,000 souls. Varnum's heart sank as Red Star whispered, "More warriors than stars." The horse herd alone screamed danger. 15,000 to 20,000 mounts meant 3,000 to 6,000 fighters, far beyond General Terry's estimate of 800. Varnum scrawled a note, "Large village, massive herd, 20 miles out," and handed it to Red Star and Bull. They galloped off at 5 a.m., hooves thundering through the dawn. By 7:30, the note reached Custer, camped along the Rosebud River. He read it, his blue eyes narrowing, then tossed it aside. "Scouts exaggerate," he said to his aide, Lieutenant William Cook. "We'll hit them hard and fast." His men, 600 strong, were bone-weary, their horses starved by the native herds grazing. Why did Custer dismiss the warning? Pride, perhaps, or the ghost of Washita, where he'd crushed a Cheyenne village in '68. He craved another legend. Back at the village, Sitting Bull knelt by a fire, offering sage to the spirits. His vision from days before, a storm of soldiers falling like grasshoppers, burned in his mind. "We fight for our home," he told Crazy Horse, the Oglala war leader, whose single feather gleamed in the morning light. Crazy Horse nodded, his Winchester rifle slung across his back. "Let them come," he said, his voice steel. The village prepared, warriors painted their faces, women hid children in ravines, and elders sang of courage. Red Cloud's daughter tied a hawk feather to her braid, her heart a drum of defiance. "If we fall free," she vowed. The scouts' warning hung in the air, unheeded. Varnum, weighed by 20 pounds of gear, slumped against a rock, his doubt growing. Half-yellow face met his gaze. "You don't see because you don't know the land," the crow said. "Those horses mean death." The terrain itself was a weapon. Cliffs to the west, a swollen river to the east, ravines slicing the valley like traps. Historian Robert Utley later wrote, "The land was the tribe's ally." Custer's plan to join Terry's column was unraveling, he'd strike alone, splitting his force. Why risk it? Glory called louder than caution. As the sun climbed, dust rose on the horizon. Swift Hawk, watching from a ridge, spotted blue coats glinting. His breath caught, hundreds, not thousands, but enough to wound. He raced to the village, his cry piercing the morning, "The soldiers come." Tension snapped like a bowstring. Would Custer's gamble spark triumph or doom? Why did he ignore the scouts' wisdom? Could trust have saved his men? The sun blazed high, scorching the 7th Cavalry as they trudged down the Rosebud. George Armstrong Custer rode ahead, his buckskin jacket flapping, golden curls spilling from his hat. At 36, he was a Civil War hero, general, to his men despite his lieutenant colonel rank. Ambition pulsed in him, a fire that both led and blinded. But his 600 men were no monolith. Captain Frederick Benteen, grizzled and bitter, muttered curses, still stung by Custer's abandonment at Washita. Major Marcus Reno, 41, nursed his own resentment, overshadowed by Custer's fame. Their horses, weakened by hunger, stumbled on grassless plains, stripped bare by the native herd. Since June 22, they'd covered 70 grueling miles from the Yellowstone River. Each soldier carried a Springfield carbine, 100 rounds, and 60 pounds of gear. The pack train, 130 men guarding 24,000 rounds, lagged miles behind. Varnum's note, delivered at 7:30 a.m., confirmed the village's location. Custer's plan to join Terry's 2,000-man column collapsed. "We strike now," he told Cook, splitting his force, Benteen with 125 to scout south, Reno with 175 to charge the village's south end, himself with 210 to hit from the north. The pack train trailed, a distant lifeline. Why divide against such odds? Custer banked on speed, believing the tribes would flee as at Washita. But the terrain betrayed him, steep bluffs, deep ravines, hidden fords, as 1876 maps later showed. Mitch Boyer, riding with Custer, warned, "This camp is too big, General. Thousands of warriors." Custer laughed, slapping his thigh. "We'll be done by supper." His men, sleepless after a night march, were low on rations, their carbines slow against Winchester repeaters. Historian Gregory Michno later wrote, "The land favored the defenders, who knew its every fold." In the village, Crazy Horse rallied his warriors. "They come to steal our home," he said, his voice a blade. Red Cloud's daughter, mounted beside White Elk, gripped her bow, her eyes blazing. "Let them taste our arrows," she said. The village was a fortress. The river, 50 to 100 yards wide, guarded the east, cliffs loomed west. Warriors, 1,500 to 2,500 strong, moved like shadows, their ponies swift. Sitting Bull, watching from a rise, prayed for strength. "Wakantanka, shield our children," he murmured. Custer's column crested a hill, the village sprawling below. His heart raced, glory was near. But Boyer's words echoed, "Too big." A scout pointed to dust rising south, Reno's charge had begun. Custer grinned, unaware his plan was fraying. A single misstep could unravel everything. What fueled Custer's reckless split? Was ambition his doom? Midday, June 25. The sun scorched at 80 degrees Fahrenheit, baking Major Marcus Reno's 175 men as they forded the Little Bighorn's 50-yard span. Wool jackets shed, their sweat-soaked shirts clung to their backs. Reno, a weathered officer but no Custer, led companies A, G, and M, their saddlebred splashing through the current. "Charge," he roared, hooves thundering, dust choking the air. They expected a scattering village. Instead, they met a wall of fury. The camp stretched 3 miles, 1,200 teepees, 4,000 to 8,000 souls, 1,500 to 2,500 warriors. Hundreds surged forward on ponies, armed with bows, tomahawks, and Winchesters firing 12 to 16 rounds to the Springfields 1. Reno halted 300 yards out, forming a skirmish line, 131 shooters, 44 holding horses. Their volleys held briefly, but warriors multiplied, 500, then 1,000, flanking with war cries that froze blood. Red Cloud's daughter loosed an arrow, striking a soldier's shoulder. "For our home," she screamed. White Elk, beside her, fired his repeater, dropping a cavalryman. Reno's line buckled. "Hold," he shouted, but the tide was relentless. Why not press forward? The odds were crushing, 7 to 8 warriors per soldier. He ordered a retreat to a cottonwood grove, then, overwhelmed, to the bluffs. The withdrawal was chaos. Warriors harried them across the river, up 200-foot slopes, picking off stragglers. 40 of Reno's 175 fell, 13 wounded. Survivors dug in atop the bluffs, hearts pounding, Custer nowhere in sight. Private William Taylor scribbled later, "The Indians hit like the earth unleashed." Cheyenne warrior Wooden Leg recalled, "We knew we'd win." On the bluffs, Reno's men gasped, their ammo dwindling. Dust rose north, Custer's fight, unseen. A young trooper, Private Malone, clutched his carbine, muttering, "Where's the general?" Reno, face ashen, had no answer. Below, Crazy Horse rallied his warriors, his voice cutting the din, "Finish them." Red Cloud's daughter, blood streaking her arm, rode beside him, her eyes fierce. The village's women, led by elders singing grass, dragged the wounded to safety, their songs defying the chaos. Reno's charge had sparked disaster. His retreat, though desperate, saved most of his men, but at what cost? The 7th was fracturing, Custer's fate unknown. Was Reno's retreat cowardice or survival? How would you face such odds? Dust choked the valley as Reno's men clung to the bluffs, their Springfields spitting smoke. A cry pierced the chaos, Crazy Horse is coming. The Oglala leader, 35, stormed in on a lightning-painted horse, his Winchester raised. Warriors rallied, 1,500 to 2,000 strong, encircling Reno like a noose. Crazy Horse flanked and feinted, exploiting ravines and ridges. The soldiers' slow carbines were no match for repeaters. Horses bolted, men fell. Reno's line held 15 minutes, then crumbled. 40 dead, but his retreat saved the rest. North, Custer's 210 men fought alone. Cresting Medicine Tail Coulee, they saw the village's scale, too late. Warriors, led by Gall, swarmed, their numbers doubling Custer's. Hoka hey! Gall roared, his lance bloodied. Custer's men formed a desperate knot on a hill, later called Last Stand Hill. Their carbines jammed, ammo ran low. Cheyenne Chief 2 Moon later said, "We chased them like buffalo." Custer, bloodied but defiant, fired his pistols, shouting, "Hold fast, boys." But the tide was merciless, within an hour, all 210 were dead. Why did Custer fall? Hubris. He'd ignored Boyer's warning, "This is the biggest village I've ever seen." Splitting his force left him vulnerable. The tribes, defending 8,000 loved ones, fought with unmatched unity. Crazy Horse and Gall's tactics, fluid, relentless, outmatched Custer's rigid playbook. Springfields fired once every 10 to 15 seconds, Winchesters unleashed storms. The terrain, mapped later, was a trap, ravines hid warriors, cliffs blocked retreat. Back at the village, Red Cloud's daughter tended a wounded white elk, her hand steady despite her fear. Singing Grass sang of victory, but Sitting Bull's eyes were heavy. "This is not the end," he said. The triumph was fleeting, U.S. forces would soon overwhelm the tribes. Yet for one day, they'd stood unbreakable. The battlefield, now silent, whispered of courage and cost. What lessons does Little Bighorn teach? How can we honor its defiance today?